I'm in the 4th year of my doctoral program, a time that should be filled with the frantic energy of finishing a dissertation and looking toward the future. For me, that future was supposed to include my fiancée, Maya. We'd been together for years, navigating the pressures of academia side by side. But lately, she's become completely enchanted by the new guy who just joined our research lab. While she's distracted by him, my own focus has narrowed to a singular point: my experiments. Because unlike anyone else, I know this isn't my first time living this life. I've been given a second chance. Even as I stand here, pipetting a solution with practiced ease, I'm counting down the days until I graduate. Maya sees my quiet intensity and mistakes it for excitement about our upcoming wedding. She has no idea that the real reason my heart beats a little faster is the thought of what comes after. An invitation to a classified national project sits in my inbox, a path I turned down once before. Once I walk through that door, she, and this life I'm leaving behind, will never be able to find me again. "Hi everyone, I'm Ethan. It's great to meet you all," the new guy announced, his smile bright and his energy practically buzzing. He wasn't the stereotypical awkward engineer we were all used to. He was charismatic and polished. Our project was nearly finished, and everyone in the lab silently understood why our advisor, Professor Evans, had brought him in at such a late stage. But no one dared to speak up. With graduation so close, we were all walking on eggshells, desperate to avoid any trouble that might jeopardize our degrees. The thought of failing at this final hurdle was too much to bear for any of us. But Maya, the moment she saw Ethan, it was as if someone had flipped a switch inside her. A light came on in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. She tried to play it cool, to maintain a professional demeanor, but the smile that bloomed on her face was a dead giveaway. I, however, chose to ignore her little moment of infatuation. I turned back to my computer, checking my email for the 10th time that hour. My fingers trembled slightly as I reread the official invitation, the words confirming my acceptance into the confidential national project. A lump formed in my throat. No one here knew this was my second time receiving this exact email. In my previous life, I had sacrificed this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for our wedding. I'd believed it was the right thing to do, the noble choice. And yet, even with my sacrifice, Maya's attention had already begun to stray. I had been the one to do all the grueling work in the lab, pulling endless all-nighters to process data and run simulations. But Maya, as the designated project leader, insisted that Ethan, the newcomer, should share in the credit. She kept pleading with me to be generous. "Leo, you've already published several papers," she had argued back then, her voice laced with an exasperated sort of righteousness. "You'll have no problem getting a position at a good research institute. Being the third author on this won't hurt your career. But Ethan is just starting his PhD, and he really needs a publication to get his foot in the door." When I hesitated, her frustration boiled over into anger, and she accused me of being selfish and petty. In the end, worn down by the combined pressure from her and Professor Evans, I relented. The final paper listed our advisor as the first author, Ethan as the second, and Maya as the third. I, the person who had poured his very soul into the research, was relegated to fourth. The paper went on to cause a huge stir in our field, and Ethan was immediately hailed as a prodigy. Maya and Professor Evans also enjoyed a great deal of recognition and a host of rewards. As for me, my health had deteriorated from overwork and accidental exposure to carcinogenic reagents during a botched experiment. I ended up dying alone in a sterile hospital bed, never even seeing the wedding day I had given up everything for. It was only before I passed that I learned the full truth. Maya had grown tired of my quiet, focused nature and had fallen for Ethan's superficial charm. So this time, When Maya approached me with the exact same proposition, I was ready. "What does Ethan have to do with us?" I asked her directly, my voice even. "He just joined the lab. We barely know the guy." She paused, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "Have you really never met someone like him before?" she asked, as if I were the one being strange. "You can't help but want to be nice to him." I pressed further. "Is that what this is? Just being nice?" Taken aback by my directness, her voice rose in pitch. "Leo, what are you implying? What kind of person do you think I am? Don't you understand that Professor Evans brought him here for a reason?" She looked at me as if I'd lost my mind when I said I was going to speak to the professor about the authorship issue myself. She opened her mouth to say something else, probably another warning, but she seemed to think better of it and held her tongue. Later that evening, back at the apartment Maya and I shared, I locked myself in my room. On my phone, the wedding countdown app, once a symbol of our shared future, now felt like a relic from a life I no longer wanted. I held my finger over the icon, deleted it without a second thought, and installed a new one, a simple, discrete countdown to the start date of the national project. Just 2 more months. 2 months until I could finally say goodbye to Maya and this painful charade forever. 2 months until a new, challenging, and meaningful chapter of my life could begin. This time, I was finished sacrificing my dreams for someone else. A week later, I found Professor Evans in her office. "Professor," I began, my tone polite but firm. "Since the project is effectively complete, I'd like to formally request that I be listed as the first author on the paper." She looked up from her computer, her expression barely changing. She gave me her usual passive-aggressive smile, a look I used to dread but now saw for the empty threat it was. "Leo, you're graduating soon, aren't you?" "Yes," I said, refusing to be intimidated. "And all of the core experiments, the data collection, and the analysis were my work. I want to be the first author." Her smile tightened. "Graduation is still a little ways off. You're my best student, Leo. I'm sure you wouldn't want anything to complicate your graduation, would you?" The subtext was as clear as day. She was threatening me. "No, Professor, I don't," I replied calmly. She seemed satisfied with my answer. "Good. Just focus on finishing this last experiment. Don't you worry about the paper." "But, Professor," I continued, my voice dropping slightly, "if my position as first author is what jeopardizes my graduation, then I'll have no choice but to go public with what I know about you and Ethan." I had learned about their affair in my past life, and this time I had been careful. I'd collected evidence, discrete photos of them on dates, records of them entering hotels together. I was fully prepared to burn my own bridge if it meant taking her down with me. Her hand, which had been resting on her mouse, began to tremble. "Leo," she said, her voice suddenly losing its edge, "let's not do anything rash. I'm sure we can work something out." When I got home that evening, Maya was sitting on the couch, poring over some project materials. I told her I had spoken with our mentor and that I was now officially listed as the first author on the paper. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. She almost blurted out, "What about Ethan?" But she caught herself when she saw the look on my face. She quickly tried to recover. I just thought, because of his connection to the professor." I looked her straight in the eye. "So what?" Maya didn't have an answer for that. Instead, she deflected with a question of her own. "Really? The professor actually agreed? What's your secret? Did you bribe her or something? What did you tell her?" I just shrugged. I told her that since I handled all the core experiments and data, I deserved to be the first author. And she just agreed to that? Maya looked completely shocked. Before I could answer, I heard the sound of the shower running in the master bathroom. "Someone's here?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She didn't even try to hide it this time. "Yeah, it's Ethan. He said the showers in the dorms were disgusting, so I told him he could use ours." A humorless sneer touched my lips. Maya, ever the picture of calm reason, added, "Ethan's the youngest in our group. As his seniors, we should look out for him, right? Plus, you know he has that connection with the professor." I cut her off, my voice sharp with sarcasm. "Since he's so special, why don't you start feeding him baby formula and changing his diapers, too? You know, to really honor that connection." She was stunned into silence, her mouth opening and closing, but no words coming out. I don't think she ever expected quiet. Lab-bound me to say something so pointed. But in this second life, why should I hold anything back? Just then, the bathroom door opened, and Ethan walked out, his cheeks flushed from the hot water, a towel slung around his neck. Maya froze, just staring at him. Her eyes darted nervously between him and me, a look of panic dawning on her face. I was about to ask if her reaction was solely because of his mentor connection. But before I could, she muttered a flimsy excuse and hurried back to her room. Now it was just me and Ethan. The shy newcomer act from moments ago was gone, replaced by a smug grin. He looked at me as if to say, "See? Your fiancée isn't worth much. All it takes is a little attention from me and she's wrapped around my finger." I ignored him completely and headed for my own room. When someone is trying to provoke you, the most powerful thing you can do is give them nothing. His goal was to see me angry, to see me lose my composure, and I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction. "Come on, man. What's with the cold shoulder?" Ethan's voice followed me, laced with annoyance. Did I do something wrong? I pretended not to hear him and simply shut my door. Back in the sanctuary of my room, I opened the countdown app. Watching the numbers tick down day by day, hour by hour, brought me a profound sense of peace. 50-something days to go, 50-something days until my world became quieter. Simpler. After that, it would be all about the work, about contributing to something larger than myself, for the country, for the public, for the sake of science itself. The next day, I was in the lab right on time. There was only one final, crucial experiment left to perform. Once it was done, the project would be wrapped up, and I would be on the clear path to graduation and my new life. A fresh start was so close I could almost taste it. But with that excitement came a sliver of anxiety. In my past life, this was the experiment that had gone so horribly wrong. Back then, as I was injecting the last of the lab mice, one of them had kicked violently. The carcinogenic substance I was working with had splashed onto my arm. My safety gear had failed, and that single moment had sealed my fate. My ultimate sacrifice had been twisted into a victory for someone else. This time, however, I was wiser. I was meticulous. I carefully strapped down each of the mouse's limbs before beginning the injection. I double-checked every seal on my protective suit. Only when I was absolutely certain everything was secure did I proceed. As I administered the injection to the final mouse, I let out a long, slow breath. This life, it seemed, was finally on a better track. But a few days later, when I returned to the lab to record the initial data, I found Ethan standing by my cages, feeding my test mice random snacks from a bag. For a second, my vision went black with rage. Even with the memory of the fatal accident from my past life, I had chosen not to sedate the mice for this round. I needed the results to be perfectly accurate, with no external variables interfering. And now, Ethan had casually destroyed weeks of my painstaking work. Snapping back to reality, I stormed over to him. "What the hell are you doing?" Ethan looked up at me with an expression of pure innocence, blinking his wide eyes. "I just thought they could use a snack. They looked so pitiful." I almost laughed out of sheer frustration. "Variable control. Have you ever heard of it?" His eyes began to well up with fake tears. "Mice are so cute. How could you experiment on them, Leo?" He paused for dramatic effect. "Even if you have to, can't you at least make their last days a little happier?" His performance sparked whispers around the lab. I was so furious my hands were shaking. "This is a science laboratory, not a petting zoo. If you're that soft-hearted, why did you choose to major in biomedical engineering? Why did you join this team?" I pressed on, my voice rising. "Do you have any idea that a successful experiment here could save thousands of human lives?" Ethan just made a face. "The mice aren't just yours. Why can't I touch them? This lab belongs to everyone. It's not like you own it." Before I could respond, Maya chimed in from across the room. "Leo, he didn't mean any harm. He's just too kind for his own good. We can just redo the experiment." I shot a look at Maya, then let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "So very kind," I said, turning my attention back to Ethan. "I'm sure with all that kindness you've never once used mice for your own experiments, have you?" Ethan wore a proud little grin. "Of course not. I'm not that cruel." I looked at him, at his perfectly styled hair and rosy cheeks, and then I glanced at the other exhausted researchers in the lab with dark circles under their eyes. "That's interesting," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Because I was looking at your master's thesis on CNKI the other day. It very clearly utilized a mouse model." The color drained from Ethan's face in an instant. He started mumbling, unable to form a coherent sentence. The chatter in the lab grew louder as people started to connect the dots. Ethan looked desperately toward Maya, silently pleading for her to rescue him. Maya frowned, stepping in to try and smooth things over. "Leo, he only made a mistake out of goodwill. Why are you bringing up the past? Let's just focus on the experiments. Everyone makes mistakes. As a team, suspicion and complaints are not productive." I gave her a cold stare. "It's easy for you to say focus on the experiments, Maya. The experimental model has been compromised and all the data is now useless. Are you going to cover the costs and time it will take to redo everything? Or will Professor Evans be bailing you out? And tell me, is the workload for this experiment being shared by the entire team? Or is it just convenient for our kind-hearted junior member to play the saint?" Then I turned my full attention back to Ethan. "Don't mistake false virtue for kindness, and don't let your emotions overshadow science. If you can't understand that basic principle, then stay out of this lab. We are not playing games here. Every experiment is a battle." With that, I ignored their stunned faces and walked out of the lab. I could hear Maya's footsteps hurrying after me, but I didn't turn back. That evening, Maya tried to broker peace by insisting I join her for a special dinner she had cooked. The table was filled with all of my favorite dishes, a clear olive branch. I ate in silence, not offering a single word. Finally, Maya couldn't stand it anymore and broke the silence. "You didn't have to bring up his thesis today in the lab, you know." I looked up at her briefly, but remained silent. She sighed and continued. "What other people do with their papers isn't our business. We just need to focus on our own projects. Humiliating a young student doesn't help anyone." I let out a small, bitter laugh and picked up a piece of food with my chopsticks. "Funny, you usually care most about him." Maya's expression froze for a second, but she quickly composed herself and said nothing, instead placing more food onto my plate. After a long pause, she spoke again, her voice softer. "Leo, you've lost weight, and your dark circles are getting worse. You need to take better care of yourself." I stared down at the food she had given me, but made no move to eat it. She kept talking, a hopeful note in her voice. "Don't forget about our wedding plans after we graduate. You have to be the most handsome groom." I finally put down my chopsticks, looked up at her, and smiled. The smile was just a mask. Inside, I was silently counting down the days. Maya offered to help me redo the experiment. Before she started to inject the reagent, I stopped her. The standard protective gear is useless against this substance, I warned her. You have to tie the mouse down securely. If it kicks, the reagent could splash, and the consequences will be severe. She paused, surprised by my serious tone, and for the first time she seemed to finally grasp the danger of the work we were doing. Her eyes reddened slightly, and it looked like she wanted to say something, but she ultimately remained silent. Once the experiment was nearly complete again, Maya left to meet with our advisor. I stayed behind in the lab to clean up, carefully archiving the new data and storing the reagents. Just as I was finishing, Ethan walked in holding a bubble tea, a sweet, cloying smile on his face. "Senior, I brought you something to drink." Without looking up, I continued to carefully secure the cages containing the white mice. Noticing my actions, Ethan's smile faltered. His expression soured. "What, you think I'm a thief?" he muttered, his tone resentful. "You really know how to hold a grudge. No wonder Maya says what she does about you." I finally looked up at him, my expression calm. "You really don't understand basic lab protocols, do you? No wonder the professor says what she does about you." The color drained from Ethan's face. He bit his lip, remaining silent for a long moment before he finally spoke. "How much do you know?" I glanced at him indifferently. "So that's an admission? You really are as empty-headed as you look." I ignored him after that and went back to organizing the equipment. After a long day, all I wanted was a hot shower. When I opened the bathroom door at home, a familiar, cloying scent of cheap cologne hit me. I frowned, noticing that Ethan's toiletries had completely taken over the sink counter. My own few items had been carelessly shoved into a corner. Seeing this, I just chuckled coldly. I found an empty box and packed up all of his things, placing the box neatly outside our front door. Feeling a bit lighter after my shower, I was towel drying my hair as I walked back to my room. As I pushed the door open, I saw a shadowy figure standing by my desk, holding my phone. The glow from the screen illuminated Maya's face, casting her expression in an uneasy, guilty light. My heart skipped a beat. The countdown app. The one for the classified project. Maya froze like a deer caught in headlights. She turned around slowly, forcing an awkward smile. "Oh, your phone rang, so I was checking to see if it was anything important." Seeing her guilty expression, I felt a wave of relief. She hadn't found out about the project. I quickly walked over and took my phone back from her, noticing it was open to a messaging app. I smiled, my voice slow and deliberate. "Maya, I hope you understand the basics of respect and personal boundaries." Her face fell. "Leo, you've been acting so distant lately. I was just worried about you. You're still mad about what happened with Ethan, aren't you? He's simple-minded like a kid. Why do you have to pick fights with him? Everyone else in the lab gets along with him just fine, except you. I know you feel insecure, but I've already told you, our wedding will happen as soon as we graduate. I will marry you." I just watched her, so serious and self-righteous, and I felt a laugh bubbling up inside me. I was too tired to argue anymore. "I get it," I said flatly. Hearing that, her furrowed brow finally relaxed. "Good. Get some rest. Good night." "Yeah, good night," I mumbled, not even bothering to look up. Maya seemed not to notice my complete indifference and left the room, seemingly satisfied. After she was gone, I opened my phone and looked at the countdown app. My restless heart finally calmed. Just a little over a month to go. It would be soon. The next morning, while I was brushing my teeth, I noticed that all of Ethan's things, which I had packed up and left by the door, were back in their place on the bathroom counter. This time I couldn't be bothered to do anything about it. After all, they would both be irrelevant to me soon. There was no need to make any extra moves. You can't wake up someone who is pretending to be asleep. For the days that followed, I threw myself completely into finishing the project. Every waking moment was spent in the lab, collecting and analyzing data down to 4 decimal places, repeatedly revising the final report until it was flawless. Every chart, every conclusion was scrutinized countless times. I knew this project wasn't just my ticket to graduation. It was the springboard for the next, more important phase of my life. Finally, the project paper was complete. At the final authorship meeting, I stated my demand to be the first author clearly and without hesitation. After our last negotiation, Professor Evans didn't object. She just gave a brief, silent nod of her head. As for Ethan, his face was pale, but he stayed silent, his eyes fixed on the papers in front of him. Only Maya looked completely incredulous. She opened her mouth as if to protest, but since the professor had already made her decision, she didn't argue. After the meeting, Maya hurried to catch up with me in the hallway. "Leo, wait!" I stopped and gave her a cold stare. She frowned, her face a mask of confusion. "How? How did you get the professor to agree to make you the first author? It doesn't make any sense." She leaned in closer and whispered, "You didn't bribe her, did you?" I couldn't believe I had ever had feelings for this woman. "Bribe her? Maya, do you really think everyone invests in relationships the way you do?" She was taken aback, her face turning pale. "Then how did you do it?" I gave a cold smile, squinting slightly. "You can thank our junior colleague, Ethan." She was stunned. "What does he have to do with this?" I didn't bother explaining. I just turned and walked away, leaving her with one final line. "You'll figure it out someday." At the graduation party, everyone raised their glasses, toasting the end of our student lives and celebrating the bright futures that lay ahead. Maya drank too much, her face flushed and her gaze unfocused. She suddenly lifted her glass, her voice slurring as she looked at me with misty eyes. "Leo, I have to say something. From our undergraduate days until now, I've waited for you for all these years. Finally, we're graduating. Soon we can get married." The table went quiet as all eyes turned to us. I said nothing, just smiled to myself. I had no desire to engage. Across the table, Ethan's expression turned cold, the forced smile on his face looking unnatural. He clutched his wine glass tightly, his head bowed slightly as if to hide his feelings. Suddenly, a female student from our cohort spoke up. "Maya, if you love Leo so much, then why are you always so close to Ethan? The amount of attention you give him is enough to make everyone's eyes sore." She had clearly had a few drinks herself, and her words were like a bomb dropped on the table. She honed in on Maya. "Leo's skills are top-notch in our department. He's practically a god to the rest of us. And you don't appreciate him. You're always looking somewhere else. What's really in your heart? If you can't appreciate him, then leave the chance for someone who can." The room fell silent. Maya's face changed, her expression hardening as she slammed her hand down on the table. "What nonsense are you talking about? How am I not appreciative? You just can't stand to see me happy. My business with Leo is none of your concern. Are you just eyeing up someone else's fiancé?" She stood up unsteadily, using the alcohol to fuel her confrontation. The female student merely smirked. "I'm just speaking the truth." Maya lost it. Her hand shook as she reached for her glass, knocking it over. It crashed to the floor, shattering into a dozen pieces. Chaos erupted. Some people tried to mediate, others rushed to clean up the mess, but Maya only grew more agitated. It wasn't until Ethan stepped in to calm her down that she quieted. "Maya, just let it go," he said softly. "There's no point in dealing with people who can't stand to see others happy." She finally settled down, but the graduation party had already devolved into a farce, ending on a sour, unhappy note. It didn't matter to me. I was leaving tomorrow anyway. By the time I got home, it was late, but I couldn't sleep. A lifetime's worth of grudges, tangled across two separate existences, was about to be left behind. My thoughts surged like a tide, recalling all the people and events from both of my lives, all the choices, the struggles, and the compromises. In my past life, I seemed to be constantly chasing a sense of belonging, clinging to promises, thinking that my life had to include a woman, a marriage. But now, I no longer thought about those things. Why must there be a woman in my life? Why must there be a marriage? Society is always telling us how important it is to get married, framing it as a necessary rite of passage. It's presented as the ultimate achievement, and without a marriage and a family, you're made to feel incomplete, as if your inherent value is diminished. Growing up, we were taught to live for others, for a partner, for children, for society's approval. But after all these years, I've realized it's all just conditioning, a chain that society places on individuals. A marriage and a partner can be choices, but they shouldn't be a destination. They shouldn't be the center of my life or the definition of my existence. I once put marriage on a pedestal without even realizing it, and in doing so, I pushed myself too low. Now, I finally understood what I really wanted. Why should I waste my life on the mundane aspects of a relationship when I could be doing something truly meaningful? Research is my real passion, a career worth dedicating my entire life to. I knew now, with absolute certainty, that I would have no regrets. In the pre-dawn hours of the morning, I left. Maya was in a deep sleep, completely unaware of my departure. Goodbye, Maya, I thought. May we never see each other again. The 3-year National Confidential Experimental Project officially began. The work was extremely challenging, with tight schedules and heavy tasks. It was an almost non-stop cycle of experiment design, data analysis, and troubleshooting technical issues, one after another, from morning until late at night. But even with the immense pressure, I felt surprisingly fulfilled. I knew that once this project succeeded, it would be a groundbreaking achievement that would save thousands upon thousands of lives. Every time I saw the experimental data align more closely with our projections, the exhaustion would temporarily melt away, replaced by an unparalleled sense of satisfaction. Honestly, I was a bit surprised at myself. In those 3 years, I rarely thought about Maya, Ethan, or my past life. I guess I was more resilient than I gave myself credit for. It seemed that focusing on the research I was passionate about was my true salvation. 3 years flew by in a blur of focused work. At the project's official commendation ceremony, I was chosen to give a speech as a representative of those who had made an outstanding contribution. 3 years ago, I began, looking out at the crowd of my brilliant colleagues. We chose this difficult path. Every step was filled with uncertainty. But today we are here, proving that our countless failures were not in vain. Every drop of sweat, every sleepless night of persistence has led us to this moment. This isn't just our victory. It's a victory for every life and every family that will benefit from this achievement. Thunderous applause filled the auditorium, and I could see that many people had tears in their eyes. Through the sea of excited faces, I saw a burning gaze piercing through the crowd, landing directly on me. It was Maya. In just 3 years, she seemed to have aged significantly. Her eyes looked more tired than I ever remembered them being. But I didn't let my gaze linger. I simply looked away and continued my speech. After the event ended, Maya found me backstage. Her eyes were red, and she seemed to be struggling to suppress some powerful emotion. "Leo," she started, but I spoke first, a polite smile on my face. "I heard from some of our old classmates as soon as I left the research base. Congratulations on your marriage to Ethan." The words Maya had been about to say got stuck in her throat. A look of panic flashed in her eyes. "Leo, I can explain. Please, just hear me out." I chuckled softly. "You should probably go home and explain things to your husband." Before I even finished speaking, I gave a small nod to the security personnel standing nearby. They stepped forward to politely escort Maya out. She was momentarily stunned, her face turning pale. Her eyes grew even redder, and her breathing became erratic. She looked at me with a complex gaze filled with resentment, regret, and even a hint of pleading. "Leo." I didn't acknowledge her. I simply turned and walked out of the hall. While packing up my things at my new apartment, I found my old phone. When I turned it on, it was flooded with a deluge of messages. Over 1,000 of them were from Maya. Most were long, rambling texts. I glanced at a few of them. They were mostly about her asking where I was, saying she missed me, that she was waiting for me, that she had nothing to do with Ethan. With a small smirk, I blocked her number. I had been in such a rush when I left 3 years ago that I had forgotten that simple task. After all, I didn't have time to linger on the past. The next project was already waiting for me to join. From now on, I would live for the people and for my country. Maya's perspective. Leo was always a good person. That girl at the graduation party was right. From our undergraduate days all the way through our PhD program, he was always the top student, the ideal that everyone looked up to. He was quiet, but his intelligence was so impressive, and he was always humble about it, calm, brilliant, and highly educated. He was exactly the man I had always imagined my partner would be. I remember the night after our evening study session when I gathered all my courage to confess my feelings to him. I never thought he would actually say yes. I was so happy I laughed out loud on my way back to the dorm, wanting to shout from the rooftops that Leo was my boyfriend. When did I start feeling like he was too bland? Maybe it was a few years into our relationship. The feeling became undeniable when Ethan showed up. Ethan was young, charming, and so lively, the complete opposite of Leo. It wasn't that Leo had done anything wrong, it was just that I had never met someone so bright and passionate before, especially not in our field. My heart started to wander, though I desperately didn't want to admit it, even to myself. I kept telling myself that I was only being nice to Ethan because he was connected to our mentor, because he was part of our team, because he was the youngest and needed guidance. But the more time I spent with Ethan, the more dull and overly composed Leo seemed in comparison. Yet he was the same man I had confessed my love to years ago, the same man I had asked to marry me. In the end, I was the one who had changed. Then Leo left. He just disappeared, leaving me and our wedding behind. When I couldn't reach him, I nearly lost my mind. Even if he was upset about Ethan, why wouldn't he at least hear my explanation? Why would he just vanish without a single word? I used every connection I had to try and find him. I even went to his parents' house, but it was as if he had disappeared into thin air. Eventually, in my desperation, I went to the dean and begged her for help. The dean just looked at me with a strange expression. "Maya," she said, "Leo is a living person, yet he vanished without a trace. We are all researchers. Don't you understand what that implies? You were his fiancée. Didn't he tell you anything?" I was stunned. As slow as I could be, her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Of course. Leo was always a rare talent in the research world. With his abilities, it was only natural that he would be recruited by the government for a major project. That's when I finally realized, with chilling clarity, that Leo really, truly didn't want me anymore. After he left, I drowned myself in alcohol every day. I kept trying to brainwash myself, telling myself that he would come back, that postponing the wedding wasn't a big deal. That's when Ethan slipped into the void Leo had left in my life. At first, I was furious and wanted to cut all ties with him. I told him I would wait for Leo no matter how long it took. But then Ethan told me he was sick, and he threatened to go public with our relationship at the Institute if I didn't take care of him. I felt I had no choice but to compromise. Later, I came to realize just how much of a fraud Ethan was. He was all style and no substance, a man filled with petty schemes. He couldn't even compare to a single one of Leo's fingers. And yet I had lost Leo because of this empty shell. I was such an idiot. Eventually, Ethan's relationship with his mentor was exposed. I was the one who reported it. People online started calling Ethan an academic temptress. I should have seen it earlier. With his empty schemes and lack of actual knowledge, where did his research achievements even come from? They were just the product of his looks and his manipulative tactics, of stealing other people's hard work. Leo had even hinted at it more than once, but I was so blinded at the time that I completely ignored him. All I could see back then was that ever since Ethan showed up, Leo had become different. He was no longer as reserved and quiet. Instead, he would often say sharp, unexpected things. If only I had paid a little more attention, I might have noticed that he was planning to leave me all along. But my mind wasn't on him then. Later, I couldn't take the mental torment anymore and chose to leave that world behind. I know my life will probably stay like this forever. I will spend the rest of my days cherishing the memory of the man I lost,